This video is the next video in the algebra set of videos. And in this video, particularly, we're going to look at type 1 of factorising, which is factorising by highest common factor. The idea of factorising by highest common factor is, if you're given an expression, to look at each term in the expression and decide if there's a term that can be divided out of all of the terms within the expression. If there is a term that can be divided by all terms in the expression, then take out that term and divide each term by that term itself. Of course, this is best explained by going through an example. I do have a method there, and the first step in the method is to find the highest common factor and write it outside the brackets. Then divide each term by this factor and write the results inside the brackets, and then you can check your result by expanding the bracket. And what you'll find is that when you expand the bracket, that it will equal to the expression that you would have had at the start. So looking at the example 1.1 that I have here, I have three different types of expressions, and it says factorize each of the following expressions. I'm going to begin with A, and A here is 6x squared minus 4xy plus 8xz plus 2x. If we look along all of these terms, first of all, I start with the number. Each term here in the expression is divisible by 2. Therefore, what I can do is I can place a 2 outside of where my bracket will be. Looking at each term in the expression as well, we can see that each term can be divided by x. And I'm going to leave an x beside the 2, which will be outside of my bracket. Next, I'm going to look at each term and I'm going to divide each term by 2x. The first term we have is 6x squared. Now what we're going to do is we're going to divide 6x squared by 2x. Now when I divide 6 by 2, I'm going to get 3. And then when I divide x squared by x, that's x times x divided by x, I'll just be left with x. And just to go over that again, I have x times x, and that's all over x. So what will happen is one of the x's will cancel with one of the x's here, as it's almost like multiplying by 1, and we'll be left with just x. The next one, we have minus 4xy. We divide the number by 2, so minus 4 divided by 2 will give us minus 2. And then we divide the x by x. So if we see here, we have xy, and that's over x. The x and the x will cancel, and we'll be left with y. Next, we have 8xz. Again, we look at the number to begin with, which is 8, and we divide that by 2. When we divide 8 by 2, we'll be left with 4. And then we have xz divided by x. And very similar to the last one, the x and the x will cancel, and we'll be left with z. The final term in this expression is 2x. Again, we're going to look at the 2 first. So 2 divided by 2 will give us 1. And then we have x divided by x. And x divided by x, well, the x and the x will cancel, and we'll just be left with 1, 2. Therefore, we can just keep it as 1. What we've done here is we factorised the expression 6x squared minus 4xy plus 8xz plus 2x using highest common factor. Again, the highest common factor is the highest number and variable that can be divided out of all of the terms. In B, we have to factorise 2 pi or squared plus 2 pi or h. Again, we have to factorise this using highest common factor. To begin with, I'm going to look at the number. Both of them have 2, so they can both be divided by 2. There is a pi in each, so they can both be divided by pi. And there's also an or in each, so they can both be divided by or. When that happens, we'll start with 2 pi or squared. Now, or squared can also be rewritten as or, because it's or multiplied by or. And then that's going to be divided by 2 pi or. The 2 will be divided by 2, and that will give us 1. The pi will be divided by pi, which will give us 1. And the or will be divided by 1 or, so we'll just be left here with or. Similarly, we'll have 2 pi or h, and we'll divide that by 2 pi or. Again, the 2 will divide into the 2 here and leave us with 1. The pi will divide into the pi, and the or will divide into the or. And for this particular one, we'll be left with plus h. Now we factorised the expression 2 pi or squared plus 2 pi or h by 2 pi or. In C, we've been asked to factorise 3x squared y minus 9xy squared plus 15xyz. Here, I'm going to start by looking at the numbers as usual. We have 3, 9 and 15. All of these are multiples of 3, meaning that we can divide 3 out of each term. If we look at each term as well, each term has an x, so it can be divided by x. We're not able to divide by x squared, as although the first term has an x squared, the minus 9xy squared plus the 15xyz, neither of them have an x squared, so we can only divide by 1x. And we can also divide each term by y. Again, similarly, we can't divide by y squared because although 9xy squared has a y squared, the 3x squared y and the 15xyz only have a y to the power of 1. We also can't divide each term by z, as only 15xyz has the z variable in it. Doing that then, we'll be left first of all with 3x squared y divided by 3xy. Remember, 3x squared y is the same as writing 3xxy, as it's just x multiplied by x. Dividing this then, so we've 3 divided by 3, which will just give us 1. We'll have x divided by x, so we'll just be left with an x, not the squared, and then y divided by y. Meaning that when we have 3x squared y divided by 3xy, we'll be left with just x. When we have 9x squared y squared, and we divide that by 3xy, well, the 3 will divide into 3 here once, and the 3 will divide into 9 3 times, so we'll be left with 3. The x will divide into x once, and this x once, meaning we'll be left with x. And the y will divide into y here once, and the y squared once, meaning we'll be left with just y. So therefore, when we divide minus 9xy squared by 3xy, we're left with 3xy. Finally then, we have 15xyz divided by 3xy, and here the 3 will divide into 3 once, and the 3 will divide into 15 5 times. The x will divide into x once, meaning we'll be left with 1, and the y will divide into y once, meaning we'll be left with 1. Therefore, when we have 15xyz and we divide that by 3xy, we're left with plus 5z. We've now factorised the expressions a, b and c using highest common factor. You should be able to do any type of question that requires you to factorise by highest common factor, but if you're still struggling with it, please let me know and I'll make another video to help you with it. That brings this video to an end.